Alright, so we're going to be working on the quadratic formula today. And so you need your notes that look like this on the front side, and then we're going to be working on this side. Okay, so have those in front of you. If you are in class and you need a copy, please ask for one. So the quadratic formula is another method that we can use to find the zeros. If you remember from last week, we talked about how to solve equations that look like this. And if you remember, we talked about how when you're looking at a picture, okay, your zeros are where your picture crosses the x-axis. So we're looking at here and here. And so in most cases, you have two answers. And we found them, in this case, when we did not have a b term, we found them by isolating the x squared and then taking the square root, right? Do you remember that? Now in this particular example, this comes out to be a no solution. And anytime you have a negative inside the square root, it does come out to be no solution. And so that can come up in the examples we're going to talk about today. Yesterday we talked about the discriminant, which was that b squared minus 4ac, or I guess we would have done that last week. We did the practice on Friday. So the b squared minus 4ac you're going to see come up as part of the quadratic formula. And so see right here we have our quadratic formula, the b squared minus 4ac, and that's why that discriminant can be used to tell you how many zeros you are going to find. Sorry, I keep getting alerts from my computer. Get rid of those for you. So we're going to be using the same standard form to get your a, b, and c, okay? And then we're just going to plug everything into the formula. I like to put parentheses around everything here because it helps remind me that I'm multiplying this 4ac, and then also if b happens to be a negative, it reminds me that when I square it, that negative is also getting squared. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at example 1. Now I'm probably only going to do 1 and 2 today, and then I want you to do some practice with it. So the first thing that we always do is we list out what is our a, b, and c. So a here is 2. B is going to be this positive 7, and then C would be the negative 9. Okay, and so I have that quadratic formula. We say x equals, because remember it's our x-intercepts, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. Okay? And then we're just literally going to plug stuff in here. So I'm going to take the negative b, and we said b was 7, plus or minus, that's where our two answers come in play. And then I have the 7 squared minus 4 times 2, that was a, times c, which is a negative 9, all over 2 times 2 times 2. I was going to do a 2c is 2a. So 2 times 2. Now, you could absolutely take this whole thing, and if you have a calculator similar to what we have in class, you could take this whole thing and plug it in. However, if you do not use the correct parentheses, or if you put a minus sign in the wrong place, it just creates a lot of room for error. So what I like to do is do little pieces at a time. Okay? So I take this and I simplify it. Negative and 7 just makes negative 7. Then we still will have that plus or minus, and I'm still going to have the square root, but at this time I'm going to take the discriminant. So 7 squared is going to be 49, and then I'm going to do a stage change and make this plus a negative 4. Okay, so it's going to be plus negative 4 times 2 is 8, negative 8, right, because it's a negative 4, times negative 9, which will make a positive 72. So now I'm taking 49 plus 72. And then I'm also going to take the bottom piece, the 2 times 2, which is 4. So I'm just simplifying little pieces at a time. Okay, do you see that? I took what was inside my square root and I simplified those. So now I'm going to take the 49 plus 72, which is going to give us 121. So I'm going to move this over here. And so that 121, still inside the square root, we still have the plus or minus. I still have a negative 7, and it is still all over 4. Okay? Then the next piece comes from simplifying the square root. So I'm going to take this square root. And what is the square root of 121? It's 11. So now I'm going to say negative 7 plus or minus. Now remember, we're taking the square root of 121. So it's just 11. It's no longer the square root of 11. It's just 11. And it's all still going to be over 4. Okay? So now there really isn't a whole lot more to simplify. But remember, we're going to have 2 answers. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to separate this plus or minus. And I'm going to say negative 7 plus 11 divided by 4. And I'm also going to say negative 7 minus 11 divided by 4. Okay, so that's where my 2 answers are going to come from. So then I just simplify it. The negative 7 plus 11 makes 4 divided by 4, which is 1. So my first answer is x equals 1. Okay? Then the second one, I'm going to get a negative 18 over 4, which is a fraction. It does reduce, and it's going to become 9 over 2. So my second answer is x equals a negative 9 over 2. Now I know the directions up here say to round it to the nearest hundredth. Go ahead and cross that out. We prefer fractions at Washington. So I want you to leave your answer, when applicable, as a fraction. Okay, we either do fractions or we do simplified square roots. Either one of those. Okay, so I now have 2 answers, which means that I would have probably the 0 of 1. Negative 9 over 2 is just past 2, so it would look something like, well, I guess I'd actually have to cross the line. There we go. Okay, something like that. Okay, so now in example 2, I want you to notice that we have an equal sign right there. Okay, now if you think back to example 1, it equals 0. Okay, and in your formula, it says equals x, and standard form says equals 0. We have to make sure that it equals 0 before we can identify our a, b, and c. Now, you typically are going to want your m squared to be positive. Typically. Not always, but it is easier to work with if we can do that. So we're going to go ahead and move these guys to the other side to make it a positive m squared and then make it equal 0. So this is a positive 7m, so I'm going to subtract 7m. And this is a positive 2, so I'm going to subtract 2, and I'm going to do that to both sides. Now the big key here to remember is that these are going to cancel, but these, none of them are like terms. So we're going to write out that we have 4m squared minus 7m minus 2, and of course it equals 0. So now I can find my a, my b, and my c. Okay, your a, remember, is in front of the m squared, so that is 4. Your b is in front of m, so that's a negative 7, and c is a negative 2. After that, we can just go plug it into our quadratic formula. B squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And in this case, I guess we're really talking about m. mx, it really doesn't matter. So I'm going to say a negative b, and we know that b is negative 7, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so that's a negative 7 squared, minus 4 times a times c, and I know that a is 4, and c is a negative 2. All of that is over 2 times a, which is 4. And so then remember, I don't want to just take this as a whole thing. It's huge and it can get really, really confusing really fast. So we're going to break it apart. You've got three pieces here. We've got this negative 7, which will make a positive 7, plus or minus the square root. And we're going to find that discriminant. You've already done that. Remember, we did that on Friday. So negative 7 squared is going to make a positive 49. Okay? I'm going to do the state change here. So I know it's going to be plus. And then I have a negative 4 times 4, which is a negative 16, times negative 2, which will make a positive 32. So now I have 49 plus 32, which is going to make, what is that, 81? Okay, and then I have the piece on the bottom, that 2 times 4, so all of this is going to get divided by 8. Okay, so again, we're just taking that, we're breaking it down into little chunks, right? So now I can take that square root of 81 right here. So I'm going to have that 7 on the outside, the plus or minus, and it's all going to be divided by 8, except now I'm taking the square root of 81, which is just 9. Okay, not square root of 9, just 9. Okay? And so remember, we're looking for two different answers, so we need to split that plus or minus. So I'm going to say 7 plus 9 divided by 8. I'm also going to say 7 minus 9 divided by 8. So this first one becomes 16 divided by 8, which would make 2. So that's my first 0. And then I have a negative 2 divided by 8, which reduces to a negative 1 over 4. That is my second 0. So again, I would have my picture, sorry it's a little crooked, with a 0 of 2 and a 0 of negative 1/4. So my picture would cross like that. Really sloppy, I'm sorry. So yeah, you have your two answers, and that's what we're working on. Okay, so now what I want you to do is I want you to go back to Canvas, okay? So this is where you came from. You just finished watching this video, so I want you to go back and I want you to complete this practice, okay? This is what we call the Google practice, because it's a Google slide. And I only want you to do examples 1 to 4 and number 9. They're very specific to what we just did in the notes, okay? So I want you to do those. And then you can ask for the activity practice, okay? And that needs to be turned in before you leave today. Okay, so the activity follows this. This should be done in your notebook on the page listed. You should have a page listed here now. It's not up right now because I have to look it up and add it. But it should be listed here somewhere on your screen. That's the page that you want to do your practice 1 to 4 and number 9. That's it. Okay, and then ask, I think, Mr. Shugstall, or there will be in first and second hour you have Ms. Zeller or Ms. Pagani that you can ask them for your activity. That activity needs to be turned in before you leave, whether or not you're done, and then make sure you get the assignment as well. Okay, that's items number 3 and 4 on your list of things to do today.